Hey everyone, my name is David Dunbar, or the Theme Park Evangelist. So, I was heading back home from work this morning, and I was contemplating whether I was going to do a live stream this morning or if I was going to do a recorded vlog. And I was like, I don't think a live stream on a Friday morning is really a good idea. So, I decided I'll just go ahead and do my normal live stream on Sunday evening, Sunday night, and I'll just do a recorded vlog this morning. That way, people can watch it whenever they want at their convenience. So, anyway, you're probably wondering, so David, why are you even home on a Friday morning? Today is January 20th. It's currently 10:39 in the morning. Now obviously whenever you watch it, it could be another date, another time, and who knows? It could be another year. I'm just kidding. I'm sure that people are going to be watching this year. But anyway, so I have been sick for almost a month now. On Christmas Day of last year, I came down with the flu. And then shortly after I got back home from Cosby, Tennessee, the Tennessee mountains slash the North Carolina mountains, or to make it simpler, the Great Smoky Mountains, I eventually started developing an ear infection starting on January 3rd, which is ironically the same exact day that I had an interview with the Newport Aquarium. My second interview, my first in person interview with them, because my first interview was actually trying to remember now. It was if I'm not mistaken, it was the prior week on December 26th, the day after Christmas, and that was on a Monday. And that was taking place, ironically of all places, Sawyer's, one of Katie and I's favorite breakfast places in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. So, anyway, we were just eating breakfast, and it was getting about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I know, late to have breakfast, but that's okay. It was our vacation. And I got the phone call, and I managed to do the whole entire interview right there in the restaurant. And I really did well at the interview, so he told me my next interview would be that week, and I asked if I could do it the following week because I was supposed to be. Well, actually, I was scheduled to work at the Creation Museum that week. That's what happened. So he was like, yeah, I could do it on January 3rd at the absolute earliest. And I said, that's fine. I have nothing. I can try to rearrange my schedule so I'm not working at the Answers in Genesis Distribution Center then. So I gave up working the very first week of January to go and to go do my in-person interview. I noticed that morning I was not feeling well, and as the day progressed on, I got worse, and then that night I started developing this really, really bad earache. And over the next 12 days or so, it progressively got better, but it progressively got better extremely slowly. But I knew God was healing me, as well as those eardrops I finally got a day later. Well, actually, no, I went to the urgent care the very next day, and it took me forever to get the eardrops because I accidentally sent it over to Walgreens, and Walgreens gave me every excuse in the book why they didn't have the eardrops. So by that weekend, I finally said, enough is enough. I'm contacting my doctor, and I know he'll see it on Monday morning, and he'll have the eardrops sent over to my local pharmacy, which is Meyer in Florence, which ironically is where I got my girlfriend a job at. So the next morning on Monday, because I said it technically on a Sunday, he did respond. It took him 5 minutes. He had the eardrops sent over to Meyer Pharmacy, and I picked up the medication that evening on my way to Bible study, Alan Green's Bible study, which for over 3 years now we've been having it at Gateway College in Edgewood, Kentucky. And it took at least 6 days before my hearing started to slowly but surely return. It's gotten to the point where I really don't even need the eardrops anymore, but I have them just in case. Well, I was starting to pray and hope, okay, maybe I'm starting to see some improvement. Well, come this week, the ear infection, as well as the infection that was affecting the ears, somehow turned into a cold. And I was like, ugh, you've got to be kidding me right now. So now I'm fighting a cold right now. And that's another reason why I decided to do a recorded vlog right today, because if I need to pause the vlog and go cough up phlegm downstairs, as disgusting as that sounds, I can do so. And that way you guys don't have to see me just run off. I can pause the vlog and do what I need to do, and then come back and continue. Right now, I look and sound great, but that's because I'm at the tail end of my cold right now. I've got Katie all worried because Katie does not handle sickness very well. I'm used to it. I get sick quite often myself, and usually I can fight it off quickly, but this is the first time I've been sick for almost a month. And I'm like, what is going on? Which reminds me, I do need to go take some Dayquil this morning, so that'll be one of the first things I do. And unfortunately, we're still in the process of finding a private contractor, because finally we got insurance approved to get the house or the condo renovations started. But we want to find at least 3 contractors locally that will help us, that will meet our insurance's quote, or basically set limits, and then we're going to go from there to starting the renovations, which will take an additional week. And with Katie coming back tonight, that means I can go back to using her shower again, which is amazing. But lately, I am not going to share where I've been showering, but you're not going to like it. So let's just put it this way. And it's in a place you would never expect to do it. But it's also called, you got to make do with what you got to make do. Last night I was so sick, unfortunately, I did not shower. But this morning I did at least finally get around to washing my hair. So you're probably wondering, like, why I spent the first 8 minutes discussing basically TMI, so to speak, when the video was called What It Was Like to Live in Central Florida. Well, I don't vlog as much as I used to, because I've been working at the warehouse Monday through Friday every single week. This is the very first time they didn't actually need me, and I asked, hey, can I just use my sick time? And they were like, yeah, go ahead. And I already let my normal manager know, and I figured he wouldn't have a problem with it. So as long as it eventually gets approved within the next week, I'm cool. But I wanted to catch up with everybody, since you guys only see me normally once a week, but today isn't a special exception because I have the house to myself right now. So I figured, since today is one of those unusual days I get the house to myself, right, well, for the time being anyway, and I've been thinking about home a lot. Like, this is normally the time of the year, well, roughly around the time of the year when I like to go home. And I'm like, well, I decided that I would do a special vlog. So June 14th makes 4 years that I've been living here in Kentucky. I'm aware that I've been vlogging here in Kentucky longer than I've vlogged in Central Florida. I'm aware that my YouTube channel hasn't significantly improved ever since I moved here to Kentucky because I've been learning more, and my trips to Central Florida have been more special because of the fact that you guys only get to see it once a year and sometimes twice. And also, my vlogging skills have gotten better, which makes my Central Florida vlogs much better. Versus back when I was living in Florida, my YouTubing skills were very poor. So I figured I would finally take this opportunity to share with you guys what it was like to live in Central Florida. When I was living in Central Florida, I was mainly talking about my personal life at the time. And I will tell you guys right now, I've grown not just spiritually, but mentally and physically better since I moved here to Kentucky. I mean, I've lost a lot of weight. I'm actually back at where I was just before I moved. So I'm in the early 280s, if that makes any sense. Like low 280s. I shouldn't say early, but low. Which is which I haven't weighed that low since 2017, 2018, give or take. So it's nice to be back where I was. And I look and feel a lot better. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. So, basically, after high school was over, I was, doing college. And I can tell you guys right now, that's when I spent a lot of time going to the theme parks. So, I'm going to primarily be focusing this vlog specifically around the days when I was living in Lake Wales. So I had a much bigger bedroom back then. I haven't had a big bedroom, more or less a permanent bedroom, since I moved here. Like, the last time I had a permanent bedroom, in other words, was back in Lake Wales. And of course, unlike Katie, who's blessed to have a permanent bedroom back in North Carolina, I no longer have that ability to just go back home and go live somewhere whenever I go back to Kentucky. Yes, there was a point in time where I was staying with TJ every single year, but unfortunately he made a lot of bad decisions, unfortunately, but I still love him like a brother no matter what. And that's why we're no longer friends, but that doesn't mean I don't care about him, because I care about him very, very much. And I still think about him every single day in a good way, in a positive way. And all I want is the best for him. And I pray and hope that he does finally find a girl out there that loves him and cares about him and respects him and treats him well. Because that's what he deserves. And I'm saying that because I mean it. And because that's what God would want me to say. But I am very blessed that I have the Vergaras down in Central Florida, and they're usually very good about letting me stay with them whenever I go down to Central Florida for visits. Now, if I were to move back temporarily for like a month or so, I don't know if they would be as willing to do that for me. And at this point in time, now that I have a girlfriend, even though she just said to me, oh, I don't care if you go back for a month. Oh, you could say that now because you're in North Carolina, but as soon as you get back here, you're going to be whining and complaining, I miss you. So, you know how it is. And I couldn't do that to her. And I just told her that on the phone not long ago. I said, I couldn't mentally do that to you. I know she doesn't have a problem with doing that to me. Because whenever she goes back to North Carolina, she's got her parents right there, so she doesn't usually think about me unless she's right here in Kentucky where she has nobody but me. And then, of course, her two roommates, which they can be there for her, but not to the point where I'm there for her. So, right now, it's easy for her to just push me aside because of the fact that her parents are her biggest supporters in her life. But when she's in Kentucky, they're 14 hours away from her, which makes it even easier for her to rely on me, who's only 20 minutes down the road. Now, me, on the other hand, I've come a long ways since I left Florida. Like, back to the whole Florida thing. So, back then, I used to wake up in the mornings and I would basically have the sunlight coming in through the blinds because the blinds were not that great, but I absolutely love waking up and having this big bedroom. I had a few of my stitches, like, from Lilo and Stitch, in my room here and there. And I had this really good sized closet. And back then, I had the worst anger problem. And you could see where I let out some of my anger and frustrations in the room because my room had a lot of history to it, even before all the renovations got done to the house, couldn't prepare for the move. And it was, in some ways, kind of memorable to me to look back at some of those dents I had created just to prove to myself, look how far I've come since I made like that dent years ago. And it was nice walking through the house, and I would come into the family room. I looked to my left, and there was this big 1 acre backyard, and there was this beautiful blue pool that was sparkling and looked so welcoming and inviting. And then you would turn to your right, and you would have the front yard right there, and there was my car on the driveway back when I could actually park on a driveway whenever I wanted. And I knew I was only 1 hour away from Walt Disney World, roughly, or exactly 1 hour away from Universal, and it was just so nice. So, depending on the day, I would either be getting up early or just getting up in general and heading to work, or it was my day off. And because it was Central Florida, you might as well be on staycation. So days off were AKA staycations. It was kind of nice. So an average workday basically looked like this, just for the fun of it. I know it's gonna sound strange to you hearing like what is it like to go to work in Central Florida, but I might as well start with that. So let's say I had to be at work at 6:15 in the morning at Publix by Legoland. It was nice and dark out. It was kind of cool. I would say the temperature was, let's say it's the summertime. So the temperature varied between 60 to 70 degrees out. It was so nice. And I would go out to my Ruby Red 4 Focus out in the driveway. And, I'm barely awake, so I'm like, I'm so tired. And I would make my way to the highway, and I would stay on that for about 7-10 minutes, give or take. And I would pass by a lot of familiar sights, and then I would come up to Cypress Gardens Boulevard, and I'd get into the left turn lane, and I would drive on that for the next 4 miles. And just before I made this really long bend, or got on this really long bend, there was one last McDonald's that I would stop at. This one was normally dead as a doornail at this time of the day. And even though there was a McDonald's in Lake Wales that I could have stopped at, I always like to stop at this one because I really like the way their service was and just everything about it. And even though it was a bit of a pain in the butt to get to, it was so worth it. So I would pull off at this light. It was closer to the time I moved to Kentucky. It was the third light. But for years it was the second light because they decided to install a light over by this apartment complex called Carlton Arms, which is very popular in Florida. And I would go through the drive-thru, and I was usually in and out in less than 5 minutes, and then before I knew it, I was back at the light, turning left, and this McDonald's is just after where Kay lives right now, with her close friend Dell, but that's basically roughly telling you where she lives without actually telling you where she lives. And then I would keep making the turn, the big curve, And eventually, you could see Legoland, Florida, in big letters on your left, right as you're coming up to a traffic light. And I would immediately get over into the right lane, and I would get as close to the middle of the store as I possibly could. I take a left and I go park all the way in the very back. And during the daytime, I would come out. Well, sorry, we'll start with the morning. You know how I mentioned it start out really nice. Well, by about 7 o'clock in the morning, when I started my cleaning, it got so humid. Oh my word! It was ridiculous. That was one of my biggest pet peeves I had about living in Central Florida. It was the fact that the humidity was so bad. I hated it. I was like, are you freaking kidding me right now? I'm spending next 2 hours out there sweating, my butt off. Not to mention, spiders like to lay their eggs wherever they wanted, and I'm getting spiders and spider eggs dumped all over me, which probably explains why I no longer have a fear of spiders. Probably why I never did either, for that matter. So, you better believe I wanted a hot shower by the time I got home. And I'll tell you right now, as the day progressed on, it no longer was just humid, it was hot. Like, I literally was baking out there alive. And then you can guarantee by about 5 o'clock, when normally everybody is trying to come in and do their grocery shopping at the same time, there was this usual, typical Central Florida thunderstorm that would just show up. And the lightning in Central Florida is absolutely terrible. I mean, we're talking lightning bolts that are striking less than a mile away. I heard lightning, or I shouldn't say heard lightning. I would see lightning bolts that would strike less than a mile away, and I knew exactly what was coming next. And next thing I knew, I heard this loud bang, and I am freaking out. There was one I heard one evening while I was supposed to be helping customers load their cars underneath the awning, because you know how grocery stores have awnings, right? So I think I had just finished up when I heard this really loud bang, so loud I ran into the store. I took an immediate right, I went straight down, and I went and buried myself in the stall, so to speak. And I'm like shaking. I'm like, what was that? I mean, we had some intense storms. I mean, to the point where thunderstorms just don't really have an effect on me anymore. I mean, I'm just, putting that out there. Give me 1 second. You don't want to see that. Sorry about that. So, that was what an average work day looked like in Central Florida. Now let's talk about a typical day off in Central Florida. So, I can't exactly say that I always went to Disney or I always went to Universal. And I didn't always go to the theme parks by myself. It started out that way until TJ and Kate came into my life, and that all changed for the better, of course. But there were also days I went to Legoland, which was amazing. So, basically, how I would go to Legoland. Legoland's parking fees these days is $25. Back then, maybe not so much. But the point is, I had gotten permission from Publix, from management, that is, at my store, to park in the very back of the parking lot where I had to park anyway for work. And that way, I would avoid paying for parking at Legoland. Now, Legoland, as you know, is on the immediate left of Cypress Gardens Boulevard. So let's pretend this is Cypress Gardens Boulevard right here, right? It's a 4-lane highway. You got 2 lanes going this way. Sorry, well, I should say this way, back towards Highway 27, and then you got 2 lanes going this way that are going towards the actual city of Winter Haven. And all we had to do was walk all the way down the sidewalk that would take us to what used to be a Perkins. Well, it's no longer a Perkins. Back then, yes, it was. And then we would, cross the street, and we were practically there, and all we had to do was follow the sidewalk for the next 10 minutes, and we were already at the park. All we had to do was go through security at that point, and because of how Legoland was, we always had to have TJ or Veneta go through their admissions. So basically, where you would go buy your tickets, they would have to bring their Legoland Model Citizen badge with them, as well as their tickets. And they would basically use up as many as they needed, and then they would distribute them to whoever got them. Now, the Legoland employee didn't necessarily have to be there to accompany you, but they at least had to either reserve the tickets ahead of time for whoever needed them, and you had to actually, and of course you had to have that special punch card with you. Normally, I always went with the Legoland employee, which usually was Veneta, because Veneta absolutely loves going to Legoland as a guest. So we would basically go up to the entrance, and we would have our, at that point, paper tickets scanned, and then we would go through the entire park. Now, you guys have all seen what Legoland looks like, and I'll tell you right now, Legoland gets very hot. And when I first went to Legoland back in 2013, it was so hot that day. In fact, it was so hot specifically right in the dead center of the park, which is where their Lego Miniland is, which explains why these days they now have a canopy over the entire section. Back then, over exactly 10 years ago when I first went, they didn't have that. I was baked alive. I ruined a t-shirt because it was so hot that day. But I have seen so much growth and change in Legoland since I first went 10 years ago. Legoland already had their 10th birthday last year, but this year, I think they turned 11, but I'll have to Google search that and confirm that. But as of this year, it's been officially 10 years since my very first visit. By June or July, for sure, it will be officially 10 years. But I can go on my personal Facebook to confirm that. But I know for sure it's, like, exactly if it was June or July. But I know for sure it's been officially 10 years. Also, June 4th will make exactly 10 years since I officially graduated high school. So, as cool as that is. But anyway, yeah, I absolutely love going to Legoland. I love the fact that they had the Coca-Cola Freestyle machines. As you know, I have my favorite rides there, like Masters of Flight, Lego Ninjago, the Flying School. I could actually fit on again, which is awesome. Boating School is another one of my personal favorites. There was one time I was on Boating School. If you don't know what Boating School is, you basically get on a battery-operated Lego-built motorboat. And all you have to do is step on a gas pedal, and you have an actual steering wheel, and you just drive around the course that they have built. Well, there were this Chinese family that somehow managed to get themselves stuck. And you guys all know by now, theme parks have a very strict rule about no arms and legs and anything to that extent outside your vehicle at any given time. Well, somehow I've always managed to bend that rule, at least for that ride, because somehow people are always getting stuck, and I've always managed to go and rescue them, especially that one time. That was by far my absolute favorite time, because They were looking so confused and they're yelling out in Chinese. I was laughing my butt off. It was hysterical. But I somehow managed to go and save them, and they were able to get back on track, and nobody even saw me do it. But as far as I'm concerned, they were my hero, so. Or I was their hero, I should say. But Legoland is one of those few places I feel like is just not a theme park you can stay at for very long, not just because of our age, because, we're a little too old for that place, but because it just gets so hot. There's not a lot of places to just go and cool off. Not to mention, their shows are just not my age appropriate, or appropriate for my age or anything. Now, as far as Disney World goes, I usually like to do Magic Kingdom and Epcot or Hollywood Studios and Animal Kingdom. Sometimes I like to do another mixture. Sometimes I like to do Magic Kingdom and then another park. I usually try to do 2 parks in one day, and that's usually my maximum for the day. And usually another thing I like to do whenever I go to Disney World, and this has just been something I've been doing for years, I will stop normally at the closest Publix that's convenient to get to. So for me, I'll drive down up Highway 27 northbound just before you get to Posner Park. There is a Publix right next to what used to be called Heart of Florida. Now it's called Advent Healthcare. Because Advent Healthcare literally bought out a bunch of hospitals within the past few years, including that particular hospital. And I will stop at that Publix, and I'll go inside to the deli, and I'll go and buy a sub. I really hate that Publix with a passion, and here's why. I was getting my hair cut one day at that particular Great Clips, which just happens to be in the same plaza as the Publix. And the barber just happened on my chair pointed towards the door. And I'm looking at the door / the windows, and I see a cart return jam full of carts. And of course, I don't see any baggers out there collecting carts because that particular Publix just doesn't care. And then I meanwhile see customers coming up and jamming even more carts in there, and I'm just like facepalm. I'm just like, why? I mean, if it was my Publix, even the one by the Eagle Ridge Mall, I would have seen people out there constantly trying to get carts, but that particular Publix just doesn't care, as unfortunate as it is. Even the one by in Pigeon Forge by the island, they were out there constantly busting their butts trying to get carts. I was very impressed by that. But I can't exactly say that management's great at every single store you go to. So, anyway, I basically go inside. I go get my Publix sub. Usually my favorite is the chicken tender. And then I will already have a cooler packed full of ice packs, water bottles, very cold water bottles, other snacks. And then back then when my dad was able to get me a free stroller with his Disney cast member ID, I would just basically take the name tag on the back of the stroller, because at least at Disney World, your ownership of your stroller or wheelchair transfers from park to park. At the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum, it does not at all. That's something I would like to see change in the years, but at this time it's not going to. So, but yeah, Disney World, yes, it does transfer going from one park to the next, which is amazing. And that's the same thing with parking over there as well. Versus the Ark Encounter Creation Museum, it's $15 for the Ark Encounter or $15 for the Creation Museum. You can't just take your parking receipt for the Ark Encounter and take it over to the Creation Museum and expect them to honor it. No, it doesn't work like that. Just because it's the same entity, it does not work. And that's another thing I would like to see them change in the future. But Disney World, it does actually work like that because of the fact that they make enough money that they can afford it. So once you paid your $25 or whatever, you're good. So these days, I do have to unfortunately pay for parking because I usually go by myself. But back then, what I usually ended up doing was I would ride in with my dad, or um, for the longest time, as strange as this sounds, if I show them my Disney Silver Guest Pass, somehow they mistook that as a Disney Blue ID and they would just let me through. I never understood, even though I clearly showed them it was a Disney Silver Guest Pass, they would just wave me on through. I was just like, there were times I would actually drive out to Disney World in either my mom's old van or my Ruby Red Ford Focus, and that actually worked. And I was like, okay. But I would also tell you guys right now, yes, there were times that I did rely on the Disney bus, and you can park hop with that without paying for parking, obviously. So it really depended on the time of the year whenever I would go to what I would end up doing at Disney. I'll tell you right now, Magic Kingdom is my absolute favorite to go to during the fall because it's all decorated for Halloween. They got the glowing Mickey pumpkins out. They're getting ready to do Not So Scary. Christmas time is another one of my favorite times to be at the Magic Kingdom because it's all decorated for Very Merry. The castle is decorated like it's Elsa's palace. Epcot is my personal favorite to go to in the spring for Flower and Garden, as well. It used to be the fall, now it's the summer going into the fall for Food and Wine. Animal Kingdom, I feel is one of those parks you can go to any time of the year, and it's still a very enjoyable park to go to. And then finally, Hollywood Studios is one of those parks that you can enjoy going to any time of the year. Back then, during Star Wars weekends, which hasn't ran in a decade as of 2025. So at this point, it's been 8 years, but in about 2 years, it will be exactly a decade. So that would have been the summer would have been my favorite time of the year to go to Hollywood Studios because that's when Star Wars Weekends was taking place. So you can tell that for me, Disney was just one of those places that varied depending on the time of the year. When I was like, okay, what park do I feel like going to? When my dad used to get me in, I would at least ride Dinosaur right off the bat because if you don't know this about me, I'm a huge fan of Jurassic Park, Jurassic World, and just dinosaurs in general. Raptors are by far one of my favorite dinosaurs, and that's another reason why I love Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. And then, of course, T-Rexes. They are absolutely amazing. And I think that's another reason why Katie and I were meant for each other. We are both huge dinosaur fans. And Dinosaur is just one of those rides at Animal Kingdom that I absolutely love to ride every single time. Now, my dad's close friend, Lynn Carpenter, would absolutely love for me to say this. And trust me, I'm going to. Expedition Everest is another one of those go-to rides for me every single time I go to Animal Kingdom because of the fact that it doesn't just have a cool queue line, it's got a really, really cool story behind it as well. And not to mention the ride itself is amazing. And I personally can't ride it more than once because of motion sickness problems, but I love riding that ride. And then usually after that, I'll go off to another park. If I'm ever going to Animal Kingdom with people that have never been to Animal Kingdom for the very first time, I'm taking them over to Kilimanjaro Safari because that is another one of my absolute favorite rides. I used to love the old Kilimanjaro Safari ride. I actually did a vlog about it already, basically the rise and fall of Kilimanjaro Safari, what happened to it. I'm very sure I did because I talked about the whole dark history of Kilimanjaro Safari and how dark the ride literally used to be. The ride used to talk about poachers and how animals are ours to this day still being killed off constantly. Disney has literally gotten so politically correct it's disgusting. And that's as far as I'm going with that. So, Yes, back then, yes, they used to talk about that, and the whole point of the ride was to not just see the animals, but to go save this little animatronic elephant called Little Red. So I always thought the ending of that ride was absolutely epic. I absolutely loved the whole chase with the poachers at the very end. I'm surprised back then the ride didn't actually have seatbelts because it got a little tense at times, just like um, over at Busch Gardens, Rhino Rally gets really intense at times too. But um, over time, they big time tamed down Kilimanjaro Safari, not just the plot, but the intensity of the ride. And now it is literally the closest thing you can get to an actual safari, like an actual African safari. That's just how similar it's gotten over the years. And I feel like that's one of those rides that is best to do in the morning. But for me, I also especially love doing it right after it rains. It's so cool, especially since there's extra water on the roads and the trucks are really good about trucking right through the water. Something I always wanted to do in Central Florida while I was living there that I never got to do. I either wanted to do the Wild African Trek that's right next to Kilimanjaro Safari or the Behind the Scenes tour at the Living at the Land. I think that would have been so cool to do. And then finally, you've also got Universal, the other park I used to spend a ton of time at. And Universal, if you're wondering, when, David, do you like to go to Universal the most? So either the end of January when Rock the Universe is now, which used to be, for those of you who don't know, when a celebration of Harry Potter used to be, but with the Wizarding World of Harry Potter constantly expanding, there really is no need to have a celebration of Harry Potter anymore. So they decided to go ahead and just make that their permanent time frame for Rock the Universe. Rock the Universe has been going on for years. Night of Joy died off 6 years ago by September. I actually got to go to the very final concert of Night of Joy, believe it or not, which it probably explains why it has so many views on YouTube right now. So I'm not even lying. I had really wanted to go to the Friday night because that's when Colton Dixon was performing. I got to go see him live. Normally, they would have been doing autograph sessions. They had switched it over to Wide World of Sports. And they canceled the second night because of Hurricane Irma. But Disney decided after that year it was just not doing well at Wide World of Sports anymore. And Magic Kingdom was just way too busy to keep putting it over there, and they didn't want to put it back over at Hollywood Studios, so they decided to just go ahead and pull the plug on it altogether. And that's probably why my YouTube video of Night of Joy 2017 has so many views, because I had no idea while I was filming it, it was going to be the very last one. And to this day, I'm still like, I cannot believe I filmed that. It's one of those things, it's just like, when I filmed Ken Jennings becoming the greatest of all time, I didn't expect that to blow up as much as it did on YouTube. I mean, it's got thousands of views already, and I'm still like, how? But you know what? That's cool. I like that. But Universal, I would also say another time period I love to go to Universal a lot is between the months of February and April. Why is that? Well, there's a really cool spring event that is coming up in the next couple of weeks, if you're not aware. And for those of you who are not aware, this event originated in Mobile, Alabama, not New Orleans. Though everybody likes to say it started in New Orleans. What am I talking about? Mardi Gras! Mardi Gras is a huge event at Universal, and it's been one of my favorite events to attend at Universal for years. I don't go for the alcohol, for those of you who think I do. No, I actually like to go a lot, not just for the parade, but I also am a huge fan of the concerts. Now, this year's concert lineup, very, very disappointed with. I don't know what's gone on with Universal over the years. Their concert lineup has gone downhill. Don't mind the cats fighting in the background. But I was just like, what the heck? Very, very disappointed with Universal's concert lineup this year, and I really didn't know what to say. So, but normally I would have said yes, that's my favorite, because back then they had some amazing bands. I was at Universal one year, right around the time Mardi Gras was going on, and they legitimately have KC and the Sunshine Band performing one night. And that would have been a band I would have loved to see, if that says anything about my music interest. But I wasn't really big into concerts at the time, so I didn't get to go see them. But that's one of my favorite things to do, besides Rock the Universe, is to go to Mardi Gras and go see some of these really cool, old-fashioned bands perform. And for those of you who do not know, at Mardi Gras, I have seen the following bands: REO Speedwagon, Foreigner, the Beach Boys. I've also had the chance to see, forgive me, I'm drawing a blank here. I almost had the chance to see Earth, Wind, and Fire. However, though, I did get to see another really cool band. Oh my word, I cannot remember for the life of me. But if I remember, then cool. But I almost also had the chance to see Fitz of the Tantrum at Mardi Gras. And another band I had contemplated seeing was, or whatever, sorry. I'm sick, so my brain is not working like it should be. Actually, I can look this one up really fast, so hang on tight. I know it's Andy something. Oh, Andy Grammer, that's right. I almost contemplated going to see Andy Grammer. But here is my absolute favorite Mardi Gras story to date. My dad had this knee surgery done a number of years ago. And it was back in February, I think, of 2017. So roughly 6 years ago. Fall Out Boy was performing at Universal for Mardi Gras. I really, really love Fall Out Boy. I know they're not, the most appropriate band in the world, but I am a huge fan of Fall Out Boy. I should have taken the day off. But at the same time, get this, I was on the Disney World Express monorail heading to the Magic Kingdom, and I found out that I'm glad that I didn't take the day off, and I'm really glad that I didn't go through all the misery like everybody else did. So here is what I tried to do, and then I'm going to share with you guys what I missed out on, thank God. So I worked all day, and then that evening I got in my car and I drove all the way out to Universal, which by the evening I-4 is smooth sailing. At least going eastbound. Now westbound I cannot guarantee. Going back towards Tampa, it's a hit or miss. And I can guarantee you from exit 62, where Disney World is, all the way down to exit 55, where I get off to get onto Highway 27, I have seen, or I've at least heard my dad spend 2 hours. I've done it quite a few times myself. It is a disaster there because Champions Gate has expanded that much in just 4 years. It's sickening. But anyhow, so I drove all the way out to Universal. Back then, I didn't care about driving 100 miles just like that because I was making good money and I didn't have a lot of bills. So I drove all the way out there, even though my parents are like, really? And I got as far as the security area, and there was a sign that said, Universal Studios Florida is at capacity. Please go to Islands of Adventure. Here's what had actually happened. And once again, this is coming from somebody who used to live in Central Florida. It's normal to just go to the Magic Kingdom on your day off. Here in Kentucky, I can't just go to the Magic Kingdom on my day off. So there was, I don't remember what it was, but not too much later after that incident, I was on the monorail and I bumped into a family who was actually at, or who were actually at Universal Studios Florida that same exact morning at the concert, the Fall Out Boy concert. They said that the park was so full they were pushing people towards the exit. Nobody was able to enjoy the concert. They had overfilled. The park had reached capacity by 10 in the morning. And my jaw dropped. I was like, I am so thankful that I did not even attempt to take the day off. Because, let's say I did, I still would have been turned away. Because knowing me, I would have slept in, and I probably would have shut up an hour or two after the park had reached capacity. I would have been forced to get there like right at park opening, and even then, I would have been out miserable. I would have been calling my mom, been like, "I need to get out of here," and I would have been able to attend the concert anyway. And then I would have been thinking to myself, "Why did I take today off?" That kind of situation. So, yeah, that's another nice thing about living in Central Florida is the fact that like where I lived, I was 15 minutes away from Legoland. I was an hour away from Universal, and I was roughly an hour away from Walt Disney World. I used to go to Disney Springs all the time. That's actually the final thing I wanted to mention. I used to go to Disney Springs every week. That's how much I loved Disney Springs. And Disney Springs you could go to for free. You could park at for free. I practically lived there, if that says anything. Sometimes I would just go after work, just for no reason. That was like one of the biggest benefits about living in Central Florida, at least for me. And I'll tell you, back then, I was an alcoholic. I'm not afraid to admit it. That's another reason why I had to move up here. I needed to get away from that lifestyle. I needed to get away from certain people I'm no longer friends with. So I would literally just jump in my car. I get on 27, as I mentioned, in the evening. Going towards Orlando, not a problem. Going back towards Champions Gate, not so much. So it would only take me 45 minutes to an hour to get out there. Not a big deal to me. And as I said, I didn't have a lot of bills back then, so I had money to burn. And I wasn't thinking about money back then. And that makes me really sad because now I practically live life like I'm basically forced to live on X amount for 2 weeks, and now I'm at the point where I'm like, how am I going to get another job until I could go back to the Creation Museum in March? It was easy for younger me back then, who was living in Central Florida, to be like, oh, money's not a big deal. Like, I used to pull out $20 every Saturday and go to Perkins because I could afford it. I was living rent free. I had it so easy back then. When I was younger, everything was so easy for me. Things have changed so much since I've, become an adult, moved here to Kentucky. My parents have changed my whole lifestyle. And I think that's the reason why I have such a different outlook on life. Because back then, I just didn't care. I really didn't. I'm serious. Like, I drove out to Disney Springs all the time, and I go walk around. I go to Ghirardelli, go get my free chocolate, and Chad and I used to go to Disney Springs all the time. He was a guy I knew at Publix by Legoland, but that's besides the point. And the dude and I would literally sit at the bar next to Rainforest Cafe called the Lava Lounge, and we would drink something called a screwdriver. It's basically orange juice and vodka mixed into one. And we would just sit there and talk about life. And that was my lifestyle back then. Whether I was working or not, that's where we would go every single week in the evenings. And those vodkas are not cheap. Like those screwdrivers, they're like almost $10 each. But back then, I didn't care about money. I was spending it like it was nothing. And, thinking about it years later, you're like, what did I do with my life? Like, literally. And, sometimes I wish I could go back and change the past, but here's the thing. I'm glad that I had my past, or my past is the way it is, because it's literally helped me to want to improve myself today. Can I convince Katie to do the same thing? Maybe, maybe not. But I can definitely pray for her. Do I truly believe she completely understands what I used to go, how I used to live versus how I used to live now? Maybe. I don't know. But that's kind of another reason why I wanted to do this vlog, not just so you guys could hear it, maybe so she could hear it. I would, definitely encourage her to watch this for sure. I mean, yeah, I literally had everything I ever wanted living in Central Florida. No bills, maybe very little, but all I had to worry about was car insurance, gas, of course, car repairs. I was very responsible for the car. That was the one good thing about me. I had made, even though I was making almost nothing, I was still making enough to not just spend majority of it on myself, but to also make sure I stayed on top of the car too. I would say, let's say I made about $1,000 a month. I'm just throwing that number out there. I would say 75% of my money I was spending on myself every single month. That's just how selfish I used to be. That's what kind of lifestyle I used to live. During Food and Wine Festival, I used to spend $20 at a time just on different countries. Like I used to go to 3 different countries, and I would try like 2 different plates of food, and then I would buy 1 alcoholic beverage for myself, and that was it. This past trip, I made 1 frivolous spend on myself at Food and Wine. I was contemplating on getting the honey wine, but I really wanted a Pinot Grigio. I still drink very seldom, but thankfully God talked me into waiting. And I'm glad he did, because I got as far as Italy Showcase, they didn't have any Pinot Grigio anymore. It was so hot, I didn't feel like walking all the way back to Germany either. Sorry, not Germany. I take that back. The United Kingdom section. So, I decided to just keep going forward till I got to Starbucks. And I decided I'm going to instead buy myself the seasonal Frappuccino and get myself a venti ice water, basically a large ice water. I'm glad I waited. Yes, it did cost a bit of money, but at the end of the day, it was better than buying alcohol for myself. So, yes, I am still tempted every time I go to Florida, especially when I go to Florida, to fall back into my old ways. But the thing is, I've got to let God be stronger than allowing myself to be stronger. It's so easy when I go back to Florida, a place where tourism reigns, and I'm back home, so my comfort level is super high, and I feel like I have no problems. But that also makes it easier for me to not rely on God so much. And I've got to always remember, especially when I'm in Central Florida, to always trust God no matter what. And that's why I do like to be here in Kentucky, because I trust God a lot more here. But I'll tell you guys right now, the 25 years I got to live in Central Florida was such a huge blessing. And I'm so thankful for all the years I got to go to the theme parks. I'm still thankful I do get to go when I do. I'm so thankful for the hot weather and the not so cold weather that I had, and the good memories that I had with the friends that I used to spend all this time with, and that I do have Kay and Vanita actually back in my life, that I can go to the theme parks with every time I do go back to Central Florida. But at the end of the day, and my final say is that God has a reason for me to be here in Kentucky. And of course, I'm going to keep going back to Florida to visit, but at this time, God does not have a future for me in Florida. Unless I hear from Him differently, I do not feel led to go back, not even temporarily. Because I know that if I go back to Florida, I'm just going to end up going backwards. And that's the last thing I want to do. I want to keep moving forward. So I encourage any of you that watch and listen to this video, as much or as little as you want to hear, to take that home with you today. To always trust God no matter what. To have faith like Noah. And I will see you guys in the next vlog. And always remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Have a great day. Peace out.